Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast series of real love stories where I interview inspiring couples. Today's couple has not been together for decades, as I tend to aim for with my podcast guests, but they live a very interesting lifestyle. They live on a boat together, and they've been living on a boat together for 4 years, and they share how that experience and the literal life and death situations that you can get in living on a boat helped shape their relationship and help grow them closer together. They talked about how not to take things personally if there's a life or death situation. They talked about how to have boundaries. We talked about how to stay your own sovereign being when your partner and your person is both your business partner in a way. They live on a boat together. They're married together. They share a lot of different dynamics and have found a way to make it work. This was an absolute pleasure to interview Chris and Marissa. And they actually have a YouTube channel. They have a blog all about their life on the boat. And usually they talk about the boat on there. So if you're more interested in following along for their journey around the world and the projects that they do on their boat, check it out. The show notes, the link is in the show notes down below. For those of you new, by the way, my name is Kevin Crenshaw, and I'm doing this podcast because a lot of society highlights successful people. And when we think about that, it's usually a successful business or monetary success, and not so much successful relationships. And I know a lot of people that are tuning in may not have a lot of, or if any, healthy relationship examples in your life that you know personally. And so my goal with this podcast is to highlight as many of those success stories as possible of couples who are still passionately in love, who have found a way to make it last, who found a way to make it work, no matter what your relational preference, sexual preference, or circumstances are, or lifestyle is, that you can make love last and you can find a way to make it work for you. And so I'm interviewing people who have done just that, so they can pass along their stories, their wisdom, and their advice to you that is tuning in. So without further ado, this is my interview with Chris and Marissa Neely. You're listening to The Heartbeat. How did y'all meet?
So we met twice. We met when we were kids, about 9 years old. We were both assisting our dads doing photos at a wedding. So we were 9 years old, running around with cameras and lenses and handing them off to our dads, who were basically tag teaming this wedding, for lack of a better word. And then I thought Chris was really cute. I actually have all three of my diaries on the boat that I grabbed last time I was home. And I flipped through them just to see, it's time capsule, flip through it. And one of the first pages was like, Chris Neely is so cute. And he's adorable, but he kind of scares me because of how cute he is. And then it was like months would go by, I didn't speak about him. And then it rolled into when we were about 14, 15, and we started hanging out more. He got a foot injury and I pitied him. So I would text him daily. I was like, hey, how's it going? How are you? And we became pretty close and did a bunch of things together, despite living 3 hours away.
For the first 4 years of our relationship, it was all long distance. So that was something to get used to, for sure.
Yeah.
And definitely as a kid, I was lucky enough that she had a cabin up where I lived up in the mountains, and they would visit almost every weekend. So long distance, but it was still like every weekend we could kind of do our thing.
Have some time.
There's a couple weekends where my family didn't go up to our cabin for whatever reason. And Chris took a Greyhound bus from Fresno all the way to Santa Cruz just to see me. And that was like,
it's like 8 hours on the bus.
8 hours on the bus.
Yeah.
It was the first and only time he's done that, but dedication was awesome.
there. Yeah. So for context, how old were y'all around that time when y'all met the second time ago?
The second time we were
I was 14.
And I was 15 because I'm a year older than Chris.
Yeah.
So,
and that's when we actually started talking. When we were 9 years old, we might have said something here and there on Facebook, but actually
we knew of each other.
Yeah, actually at 14 and 15, I would say texting pretty much every day at that point. So
we became best friends.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So was this y'all's first relationship, individually? Because that is pretty young.
Mine, hers, no. She was I was
a boy crazy girl.
Yeah,
okay. Well, yeah.
I was, there's a long gap between 9 and 15, 16, right?
That's true.
She was in Santa Cruz too, a city for me. And I lived in Shaver Lake, which I had literally 2 friends in about a 30-minute vicinity, car ride around me. So I would lived in a very, very small community. My high school graduating class of 100 people. So tiny compared to like what she's used to. Yeah. So I think that also plays a big part into it.
I would say, honestly, I had one serious boyfriend before Chris, and he was great. I appreciate everything that we learned together because we grew together.
We were talking, you were talking at 15, but she was dating this other guy for a while. We actually didn't get together until she was 16 going on 17. So,
but y'all we're talking just as friends.
Yeah,
just as friends.
We were best friends.
100%.
That's awesome.
Really were best friends.
It literally was like one summer basically that she spent up in the mountains with us, or with me, I should say, and it changed. So it spent way too much time together, I suppose.
When was that? I'm curious about that. Like, when was the moment for you, Chris?
I remember it was 4th of July. That weekend was pretty dead set. I was like, okay, I knew of her for so long at that point that I was like, I'm kind of done waiting. And I had heard, I just knew that she wasn't completely happy with what was going on in her life. So I didn't want to impose necessarily, but I also knew if I could make her happy, might as well. So.
And I was respectful. My boyfriend at the time, he was also long distance from me. And we hadn't seen each other in a long time and things were just not good. So, I told him, I was like, hey, we're not happy. We're young. I think it's best if we call this off. And then obviously he was pretty upset about that. And I wasn't happy about it either. You never want to make someone hurt. Yeah. But we broke up, all good things. And then I think it was 3-4 months later before Chris and I actually got together, because I wasn't just going to, jump ship onto it, for lack of a better word. But he waited. He was patient. He waited till I was ready, and vice versa. So
it was in August when we officially got together, and I don't remember what year that was.
2013, I think. I'm not sure. It was a long time ago.
No, I think it was 2015. That would make sense.
That would
I don't remember.
Sense.
What's 9 years ago from 2022?
That's relevant.
2013.
That's awesome. I love y'all already. You're cute together. I'm curious for you, Marissa. When did you know? Well, I mean, you kind of knew at 9, but when was it for you?
When was it an actual realistic idea?
Yeah.
Versus a fantasy.
Yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint it because obviously, like I said, I had another boyfriend at the time. Yeah. So I wasn't trying to open myself up in that way.
For whatever reason too, she always told me that she never thought that I was interested in her ever.
You're very hard to read, and your sarcasm is very dry. So, but he invited me to crew with him in a regatta. So in a sailboat race, an annual sailboat race on our home lake, Huntington Lake. Mm-hmm. And he's like, it's going to be a fun day. It's really relaxing. It's a great day on the water.
It's only a 20-foot boat. It wasn't huge.
Yeah, not a big boat. I knew nothing about sailing at the time. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So
and for context, regattas are very high stress, high energy, and there's boats everywhere. It's you kind of have to know what you're doing.
I was going to say, it's good to know what you're doing in that situation. So I did not. And Chris invited me on the boat. I was like, okay, fine. That sounds fun, hanging out with my best friend all day. And it was fun, but it was definitely a test of my patience, our communication skills. And I think that it laid a good foundation for our relationship. But I remember afterwards, I was just so frustrated and drained from the day. But Chris came up to me, he's like, you did great. What? That was awful. What are you talking about? He's like, that was so much fun. And it just it was one of those moments where I changed my perspective and I was like, okay, he can have fun in these high stress situations. He can deal with my multiple mood changes throughout the day as I'm battling something new. Mm-hmm. And he can still stand there and say I did a good job. So that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, I definitely love him. How can you not? So yeah, there's a lot of moments like that where I guess I fell in love with him, because I still feel like I fall in love with him every day, which sounds super cheesy, awesome. But it's true.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of dream, dream boat is a phrase, and you're living on a boat, so it's literally happening. That's something that I want to dive into is living on a boat together. But before we even go there, y'all were long distance for a little bit. I do want to kind of highlight that, because I know there's people out there that are listening that are in a long distance situation and struggling with that. how were y'all able to make it work? And what advice would you have for other people that are in a long distance relationship?
Video chatting.
Yeah.
I would say without internet, long distance would be super hard. We did a lot of, it was tons of video chatting, and I was, not to cut you off, but like my opinion on the matter is that you have to give, I never try to be controlling with you. I always wanted you to go off and like live your own life, because I feel like if you ever try to take the controlling route, it's very easy for your trust to turn on the other person. And then once you don't have trust in each other, then there's not much to like hold on to anymore. So I think keeping that as like the core purpose of why we're going forward, that was helpful for me, at least.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point. Since we were long distance, we were both in high school, going to completely different high schools. And I went to a bigger high school. A lot of my friends were guys, just because that's, I don't know.
Marissa's a guy at heart.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah. And I'm still very good friends with a lot of them today. But I remember that they were all warning me. They're like, hey, like long distance, you don't know what he's doing during the day. I'm like, oh no, and I never worried. I was like, Chris wouldn't do that. I trust him. It's fine. And vice versa. He said the same thing to his friends who were, kind of suspicious of the whole long distance thing.
And our families too. I remember my brother giving me like a sit down talk about, he knew of their family pretty well. They were pretty big up at our mountain of just like people that hung out every weekend.
And we knew your family pretty well.
So like my brother John had the conversation. He was like, you can't mess us up. Like, if you mess us up, they have to like move. They have to sell a cabin. It'd be a big deal. Like, you just can't do that. I'm like, I get it. So there was like that too. Like everybody, when you're in a long distance relationship, every single person around you is telling you how hard it is and how difficult it is, or how impossible it is, or
how to manage your relationship. I remember my parents, bless their hearts, they had this similar conversation with me saying, we really like Chris Neely. He's a good boy. Please don't break him. And I was a little bit offended by that at the time. I was like, what do you mean not break him? Looking back, it's like, okay, I get it. It was a pattern, whatever. But yeah. And I told Chris before we dated, I was like, if we get together, we're in this for the long run, because I cannot hurt you. And I meant that with my entire heart, because he was my best friend and I don't want to hurt him. I still don't. And so anyways, going back to your original question of how to make it work, it was a lot of video chatting. I wrote him letters, handwrote letters, and would send care packages and things like that. Quite a bit. A couple times a month, and we saw each other every chance we could get, and we just made the most out of those moments together. And for a little more context, it was every weekend I was up there, but that was like Friday night through Sunday midday, so it's not a whole lot of time. And I remember that we would get to our cabin and Chris would be waiting there, waiting for us to show up, and then he'd help us carry all of the bags in, and then he'd hang out for a little while. Then his mom would eventually call him to come home. So he'd ride his bike like 3 miles home or something like that. So making the most of the moments you have together is crucial. And
I was going to say, like, too, doing it that way, I feel like, especially as kids in a relationship in high school, it's easy to get burned out, like just spending all your time together. I think I see that a lot. Like, you start at the beginning and everything is awesome. You're in the honeymoon phase and like you want to hang out all the time. But like once you're doing that every day for like weeks, I can see it like completely as a hormonal teen of like how that could be a lot. So I think splitting it up a little bit, and like it made our time together very much like looking forward to that all week. And then once it builds up to that, it was like
made it special.
You know what I mean?
Made it a lot more special. And that's not just for high schoolers listening, if there's any listening, but that's for anybody who's jumping into a relationship with someone that they live in close proximity with or even live with, being your own person is very valuable in a relationship, I think, is a good way of saying that.
Sure.
Which leads me into, well, now you're around each other all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That
complete opposite.
So it's so like you literally live in the sailboat.
Yeah.
So you're literally around each other all the time.
Oh yeah.
How do you manage that, and what's the impact been on your relationship?
Yeah. So fortunately, before the boat, we did live in a tiny apartment in Tahoe when we were going to college. And our apartment was really small.
Yeah, it was a little studio, I would call it.
And that was the first time we were around each other all the time.
Yeah.
And we got to see these habits that we had that we didn't see prior. And I remember that was a lot to take in.
Yeah,
you wanted to
really
decorate
times
you wanted to decorate the apartment a certain way. There was like RC cars everywhere. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. So then it was like a lot of compromising.
So for us, it was just Star Wars everywhere.
Yeah.
So we had to like compromise in the two.
It was a lot of compromising, but I don't think that we had the skills then to talk the way we do now.
Nope.
I think we've definitely grown, and I had to do a lot of personal growth too, like with a therapist and things like that, to talk about things that I didn't necessarily learn as a child. So
I think for me too, like everyone tells you it's hard to live with someone, like everybody that's ever lived with someone. I think for me, we were looking forward to being together for 4 years at that point.
Yeah.
That it was like, I pushed away. I didn't completely do this for you, but I graduated high school early, a semester early, just to get some college underneath my belt, to like have some money to be able to move up to Tahoe to like be with you. She was the one that was up there already, so I kind of followed her up there. So it was a lot, like riding on just like, oh my God, I want to do this so badly. And then once you are living together, it's like all these little habits you never ever saw, they're all there now. Like, whoever doesn't clean the dishes or whatever it is.
Yeah, Chris was exposed to my rampant ADHD, where I leave little piles everywhere of just my stuff, because it's just how my brain works. And he, being the clean one in the relationship, thank goodness, was constantly going behind me, picking things up without really piecing together why I did that in the first place. Yeah. So it was a lot of talking things out. And back then we were definitely more aggressive about it. But I think that living in that first place, which wasn't a permanent home for us, was really good, because we didn't have a whole lot of attachment to it, like unlike this boat where we bought it together, this is our home. That apartment was more like a placeholder and a good test of our relationship, of where we need to work on things like communication and, I don't want to say combating each other's habits. So maybe complementing each other's habits, filling in where our weaknesses are. Yeah. And we learned a lot there. But then, so we went to college. We were there in that apartment for 3 years. Almost. And then we packed up, moved out, got married 3 days later.
Yeah, in a span of 1 week, we graduated, got married, and moved on to the boat.
Graduated, moved out, got married, then moved on to our boat. So that was a huge transition.
And like it was from Tahoe to Southern California. So we had literally luckily my where we got married was in the middle of the two. So we drove like half the way, got married, and then kept on driving all the way. It was really funny. So you should have saw our cars. Both of our cars were just like, you couldn't.
They're super weighed down
in them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Packed full.
We don't have that much stuff now. We've learned to let things go. The Marie Kondo, you know who I'm talking about. But if it doesn't spark joy, let it go. Yeah. We've adopted that very well. So we moved on to the boat, and that was a whole other set of.
What was the decision for that, like to move on to the boat?
Well, I grew up sailing for not only just on like the lake, like we already told you, but we also in my family had a 43-foot sailboat in the bay that we grew up sailing together. And so I got to know the difference between a lake boat and an ocean boat for sure. And on these ocean boats, especially like the one we ended up buying, they're built back in the 70s and 80s, kind of in like the glory days of when materials are really cheap. So these boats are built very, very well. Like they're going to outlast our life for sure. Wow. And the inside of them are all they're all teak, they're all wood. Our boat specifically was made by literally like one family in Hong Kong that would live in the boat while they're building it. And anyway, so there's a lot of character behind these boats. The whole point about them being built to the facet that they are is that they can go cross oceans and visit anywhere in the world. So we got a lot of inspiration from my brother, who did this journey about 10 years before us. They bought a boat up in Washington and sailed all the way down the West Coast. And now they're in Curacao on that side of the world. So we got a lot of inspiration from them to basically like get our teeth sunk into the idea of what it is to live on a boat and go cruising.
That's actually where Chris asked me to marry him. We were visiting his brother while they were in Costa Rica, and it was six adults on a 33-foot boat.
for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Yeah.
So
wow.
In Costa Rica, where it's, 100% humidity and like no one was basically
lightning storms every night and bugs and all that. And it was a great trip of a lifetime. I will never forget it for many reasons, but it was like the second to last night there. It was July 3rd. So whatever night it was before we left. And Chris took me out in the dinghy, which is a small boat, to watch the sunset. So we paddled out and stuff like that. And then he started telling me the story of our relationship. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was there. Like, why are you telling me this? Like, I live this. And then he got down on one knee in the dinghy, which is really hard. If you could think of a little boat and like the swell, like rocking like this, he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. And the first thing I said was, did you ask my dad?
Oh my God.
And he's like, yes. I'm like, was my dad paying attention when you asked him? Because my father has ADHD like me. So knowing Chris, he probably asked. And my dad's like, yeah, no problem. Without processing what Chris was asking. He's like, no, I asked him right before we got on the plane here. He said, it's great. It's
cool. Yeah.
It's fine. Like, I've been planning this. I was like, then yes, of course. And then, brings us up to now. But anyways, as far as the boat goes, we originally didn't plan on buying a boat like this. And as Chris was explaining, these are very sturdy, well-built boats. And
that naturally means more money.
It naturally means more money.
When we got out of college, we had no money basically. And I didn't, out of my experience of renting, especially up in Tahoe where it was super expensive, I really didn't like paying for something that was so exorbitantly expensive and not have anything at the end of the day or at the end of the year. So like my idea was that she was done with college. She graduated to a double major and I still didn't have, I only had an associate. So I thought I was going to go off and go into film school and do that whole route. And so the plan was to go to San Francisco and housing there again is stupid expensive. So I was like, let's just buy like a boat we could live on, nothing crazy. Yeah. And that would get us through the next 2 years.
That was the thought, is that we would buy a crash pad. And we were looking at calibers of boats that are noted as plastic fantastics. And that's because they're made out of fiberglass. They're very easy to repair, find parts for, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Well, they're just newer too. So they're not made, again, like when our boat was made, the glass, fiberglass and everything was just like so new. They didn't know like what it was. So they overbuilt it. And now in the 90s and like the 2000s, whatever, the building standards have gone way down, so they can make things a lot cheaper.
And they just bust out boats like every day. Yeah. So we were looking at one of those type boats, which was a little bit smaller than this. It was a 36-foot Catalina, and those are great boats. If anyone's listening that knows boats, I'm not talking poorly about Catalinas. I think they're great. But we had searched high and low for one, and we stepped aboard one for the first time, and we're like, this is not it. This will not fit all of our camera gear, tools, my clothes, my shoes, our cat. Like, there's no room. We can't do this. And that was kind of our first heartbreak when it came to finding a boat to call home. And then because our expectations were so built up, and then they came crashing down all in the span of like 3 minutes.
Yeah. So we took a long drive all the way from Tahoe to Los Angeles to look at this boat.
9 hours.
It was 11 hours.
11 hours.
Yeah. Anyways. And so we got here. That didn't work out. So we looked online really quickly for something else that was near us. And that's when this boat just happened to show up. Yeah. So we literally like drove across the harbor and stepped on this boat and was like, I immediately was like, cause this is exactly what I'm used to with how was the boat that I grew up on. And Marissa wasn't totally on board at first, but I convinced her.
It was not love at first sight. It was definitely different from other boat designs I've seen. And I, instead of just opening up my ideas of what a boat should be, I was like, I hate it.
Well, the biggest thing too is that this boat was like only sort of in our price range, even though it wasn't, because it was a project boat, like project. So we it's like the revolution, the tiny home dwellers now. A lot of people are either starting off brand new, or a lot of people are starting off
with a project.
And that's exactly what we did. So that's we don't need to talk more about the boat in like that specific way, but like that kind of led us into the next 4 years from 2018 to now of us rebuilding said boat and living on it in the process, which has been a struggle in and of its own. But
yeah, if anyone's ever done like a home remodel, you know how stressful that can be, just from even choosing the paint color that you're going to be stuck with for the next however many years. Like there's stress
usually though
in
you
every
can like
corner.
do that room by room and like live in one room at the other time. Like the boat is harder to do that because you're just physically in a smaller area.
Right.
And a lot of these projects are just so like you blow everything up so much. Like usually we don't even have floor sometimes. So you're like walking on stringers and
we didn't have floor for a while there.
So it's a whole different thing.
Pretty funny watching our cat jump across the boat when there was no floor. So there's just stringers, which are basically just like cross beams.
Oh
that everything sits on. So our cat Cleo was jumping across each one just so perfectly, making it look easy. And then meanwhile, we would get up in the middle of the night and trip and fall in. And
oh my gosh. Well, I can tell y'all are really passionate about it, which definitely helps. And it's like you're passionate about it together. I think is awesome because, you know, there's a lot of couples out there now or singles that are doing the nomad life in a van. You know, I did it with a backpack for a little bit in a season, but in a sailboat, it's like a completely different, not mainstream concept, I think, you know? So it's really awesome that y'all are living that life. And how has that impacted your relationship? Because obviously, you know, you're passionate about it together and you can just hear it by how y'all talk about it. But how, if so, has it negatively impacted? Has it been like a huge benefit? Like,
yeah, totally. Kind of so it's different for us. I feel there's a lot of people, especially because of YouTube and Instagram and all the social media pages, who see lifestyles like ours or van lifing or backpacking, and they see like the glamorized version of it. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that. And then they jump into it without understanding the flip side of that, right? Like, oh, it's actually a lot of work. And sailing is one of the oldest modes of transportation, and it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So learning how to live together on a sailboat was not only for our relationship, but it was also because it's a survival thing. Like you have to communicate well with your crew member or else something can go drastically wrong. So
it's just different if you're just living on a boat in the marina versus what we intend on doing. And we're doing in just a few months at this point. We're taking our boat that we have now worked on for so long and we're leaving the dock and not coming back. Basically, we're going to start cruising full time and living on the anchor. And there's a lot of awesome benefits about that, like not having to pay rent anymore. Like that's awesome.
Getting to see the world from our own home.
So there's a lot of benefits, but also like every night you're going to be completely in control of whether or not you're safe or not. So if there's a storm coming your way, you have to pick up and go.
Yeah, you're responsible for
no notice.
You're responsible for yourself, your boat, and your crew member. And that I feel like elevates beyond just our personal relationship as a married couple. That takes it to a heightened one of I'm responsible for you, you're responsible for me. We need to get through this safely and not be mad at each other in the moment. So living on the boat has really helped us develop that sort of responsibility for each other.
And there's like no such thing as having an argument in the middle of taking our anchor up when a storm is heading our way. I was just
going to tell that story.
Like, is there a story on that?
Yeah,
there is a story. Last time we were at Catalina, we were having a great time. Everything was perfect. We're anchored out in Emerald Bay, and all of a sudden, just this giant thunderstorm comes out of nowhere, basically, and starts pounding the whole coast. We were watching it kind of like hit Newport and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, it just kind of like flips and starts heading our way.
Which we didn't anticipate the flip. So we had tucked in for the night, feeling confident with our anchor set. And we're like, all right, like we're good. We'll check the anchor in a couple hours or so. And then around 2 a.m., we both woke up at the same time, hearing water on rocks way too close.
Whoa.
So we run outside. I had just enough time to put my contacts in. Chris ran outside in just his boxers while it's still raining outside. He doesn't even grab a life jacket, runs to the bow.
I think the first thing Marissa hears is just the engine come on, because I immediately was like, we're getting out of here. Because what had happened basically is that the wind was blowing from one direction, which is where we set our anchor, and that was putting us in a good spot in comparison to like the rocks around us. And then when the wind flipped on us, it completely blew from 180 degrees the wrong direction and put our butt of our boat like about a boat and a half length away from the rocks that we were trying to not go into.
With huge swells.
Huge swells. And
so
about
our boat was bucking
30 miles an hour winds. So like the waves were just crashing over the bow. And I was like, immediately, we're out of here.
So Chris ran back to where I left off. Chris ran up there shirtless, half naked, straight to the bow. I was sitting in the cockpit, which is where the wheel is. And I was smart enough to put my life jacket on, sir. And I was sitting there, just womaning the helm.
This is like a perfect experience. This is like that moment right there. We just hold on it for a second. Like that. I'm up at the bow right now. Yeah, totally unsafe. Don't have a life jacket on. Waves are crashing over me. And I'm just yelling at her. Like, sorry, but we have to yell at each other because I'm 40 feet away from her. There's an engine roaring in the middle of us. There's 30 mile an hour winds. So if she had I'm just saying, if like you had that opportunity to get mad at me for saying something in a wrong way to you and just throwing up your hands, like we would have lost the boat. We would have been in trouble. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, there's really not a spot for that in that type of environment.
And there's no spot for pleasantries in certain moments, especially when you're in a high stress situation like that, trying to save your boat, your family, and all of that.
If you yell at me and say, I got to jump, like I'll run on it in like opposite way too. Like there's just like an unspoken rule between us because we know in the moment we don't mean it at all.
No.
We're just trying to not lose everything.
And then afterwards, I remember this vividly, and I really respected this part about you and just us in general, is that once we were in safer waters, it was still stormy, but we were far enough out into deep water where the swell had calmed down a little bit and we could manage with the rain that was coming towards us. And the adrenaline was just starting to come down, and we just got to the cockpit. I had thrown a life jacket at Chris and told him, put this on, not fishing you out of the water. And we both just sat there for a minute assessing the situation and said, okay, Chris apologized for how he yelled at me. He's like, I'm really sorry that I yelled at you. I didn't mean it. I'm like, I understand. Yeah. That's fine. I appreciate you saying that in the first place. And then I told him, I was like, is there anything in that situation that I could have done better? And vice versa. He said the same thing. And we just talked about everything that had happened, knowing
we had a little therapy session.
Yeah. Knowing that there was some things that we could work on in the future. Like, hey, if you're going to run up to the bow of the boat in severe weather, maybe you should wear a life jacket so you don't give me an anxiety attack.
True.
Thanks.
Very true.
So like things like that is just being able to talk about the hard times. So in the future, when those situations arise, you're more confident that you're able to deal with it, talk it out, come to a conclusion, better yourselves. And that's all it really is you're learning to grow yourself, but also alongside another person.
It really is beautiful how it is giving you all that opportunity for like effective communication, not taking things personal. I mean, there's so much just in that one story alone that it's just gold.
Yeah,
I think it's really been beneficial.
By fire, but it's more like trial by Poseidon. So
that's awesome. I was going to ask about any rough times that y'all have been through and how you're able to make it through, but I feel like part of that has been talked about and answered already, unless you'll have anything that you can think of.
I mean, those are all really good stories of like, there's a really happy ending to all of them, but we've also had really bad arguments before that, and I would say most of them actually have been on land. We had a really tough time in Tahoe with just our relationship in general. Like, I think that we both felt a little lost. It was kind of right off that like honeymoon phase of not being with each other, being with each other all the time, and it not cracking up to being what it was supposed to be on paper.
We had really high expectations for living together, and it was still great. There was a lot of good times, but
it's just reality in general.
It was reality. It hit us. And there was a lot of external stressors from college. I was taking 23 units, so I was spent. I was also working at the animal shelter on the weekends.
I was working too, and not in anywhere nearby. I was usually working in LA. So I was gone for at times weeks, you know what I mean? So I think there was a lot of like tugging and pulling on us in opposite directions. And
we're still trying to figure out what our responsibilities to our families were, meaning like my family, because I was the first one to leave home. So, they're still kind of holding on, and we're trying to balance out like the holiday schedule. Like, where are we going for the holidays?
That's kind of the thing. We both have strong families that want to spend time with us. It's different from a couple that has like one family that still is very close and one other that isn't very close. It's easy to be like, all right, we're spending time with this family because it's just like what you do. So for us, it's we actually have to like have the conversation, and that's not easy to say. It's not easy to be torn from each other.
And I'd say that was a lot of our disagreements when we were first starting out, was just kind of balancing our families with ourselves, because we're trying to start our own family, like we're trying to be a family for you and I and our cat. And then, our immediate families were like, oh, we want to spend time with you this weekend. Oh, well, we want to spend time with you this weekend. So it's like, oh God, how do we balance that? And there was a lot of disagreements at first. And I think that we've come out of that and we're finally at a place where it's like, okay, we can smooth this out. Here's the plan. Here's the calendar for the year. We're going to be here then. And then we've also put ourselves first, which sounds selfish, but you have to put yourself first.
I moved out. I was 18. I lost my dad when I was 14. So like my mom has been alone for at that time 4 years. So I was very connected to like just keep, because I was the last one in the house. So I wanted to make sure she was well taken care of, blah, 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 blah. So we did spend a lot more time with her. And I think that obviously wears on both of us in different ways, but it definitely wears on you for not being with your family. So
Mom, if you're listening, we love you.
No, I wouldn't have it any other way, like how everything has worked out. But in that time, it was really difficult to try to selfishly put ourselves first, because that's not at the time what I wanted to do.
And that was also a lot of communicating with our parents as well, and our families in general, is talking about what our plans were and what our expectations were as adults. Cause that was they were learning too. Their kids were becoming adults. So we're all growing together, and that
especially when you tell your parents you want to buy a boat and sail around the world. It's not always the easiest thing to swallow.
My parents didn't hesitate as much. They like you and they trust you. You're like, okay, they didn't even bat an eye. They're like, sure. And Chris's older brother fortunately paved the way for us. So we're like, we're going to buy a boat, and everyone's like, cool.
But it's very, yes neat. And no, like that means my mom also knows what it means. And that means that you're not going to see each other for 6 months at a time, or maybe a year at a time like that. You go very long periods of time if you don't obviously like fly out, because like we have a stateroom on board that is totally acceptable for someone to come visit us. So that's always an option, but like it's hard to break away from jobs and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But that does usually mean that we will be gone from home for months on end.
Yeah.
So that is hard for family to understand. Very hard.
I got a few questions on that. I know we already talked about it before we started recording, but how do y'all live? Like, what do you do for work while you're on the boat? Because that some people's like, okay, yeah, that's awesome, but I have a life and I want to do these things, but I need to make money. Like, how do you?
No, we get that question a lot. So I post a bit to TikTok, which is somewhat embarrassing. So, but I get a lot of questions or actually more like statements and assumptions like, oh, it must be nice to be rich. And it's like, actually, no, we both work, and living on a boat can be cheaper than living on land. So
can
be depending on how you do it. I'd say for us, it's cheaper than if we were going to live on land, especially in California.
I think it's the same amount. Just saying, just what the amount of money we put into upgrades and stuff into the boat.
True.
I think it's right on par of what we'd be spending at a high rent district. But
I'm not counting projects though.
Well, that's easy not to count.
Well, you also have cars and stuff like that.
Cars, exactly.
Yeah. So basically what I do, I know. So I do digital marketing and social media management. My business is called Fairwinds Media, which is very on brand for boat life and things like that. And I've been able to do that for a while, even when we lived on land. That's kind of when I started my business, but it's given me the opportunity to work remotely from wherever the wind takes us. And right now I'm just using cell data, free Wi-Fi from the marina, but we're looking into getting Starlink because that has quite literally unlocked.
We have a lot of friends that right with us now that have it now. And it's like, they go out anywhere right now and get any internet that is like streaming, YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we can
it makes it limitless.
That's amazing.
We could be in the middle of the Cortez.
Really not that expensive. I mean, it's actually very affordable.
Yeah, relatively speaking to like regular Wi-Fi internet, it's
quite
affordable. So that's really unlocked a lot of opportunities for me to go sailing into some more remote places and still be able to maintain my clients and work and things like that, which is great. And Chris's job is kind of on the flip of that, where it's definitely not really remote, but it is flexible.
Yeah, I'm a camera operator, so I get, and it's all freelance. So I definitely don't work that much. I would say not that much at all when it comes to like a normal day job. But my job is I'm very privileged in the route that I took, because I don't have to work a lot in order to make a decent amount of money. It's a lot of initial investment, like all of my gear, and not necessarily depending on your experience when it comes to any schooling. I don't have any. I told you I was going to go to college for my film degree, but I never actually did it. I ended up just we ended up buying this boat, moving straight to LA, and I just started working. So, and come to find out, that is 100% the way you should do it if you already kind of have experience in filmmaking and know how to work a camera and blah, blah, blah. Word of mouth is like 100% the king ruler of all in that industry. So that is what I do. And to kind of like back off of how does it make sense for our lifestyle, we don't spend a lot of money, especially once we're going cruising. Like I said to you earlier, like rent is going to be in the near future pretty much free unless we need to get into a marina and get water and stuff like that.
Yeah, right now what we pay for is our slip fee. So at the marina, you pay for your slip space, which is kind of like an RV. If anyone out there is familiar with how RV camping works, it's very similar. So,
but like but once the boat is moving and sailing, diesel is not going to be that expensive for us because we have sails. So usually we can sail to most places we want to go, especially on the West Coast. And then Marissa's a great cook, so we don't really go out very often to go eating. And especially once we go to Mexico, which is in the next few months, food inherently is going to be a lot cheaper. So we've saved a lot of money. Yes, we put a lot of money into the boat, but we've been saving for like the last 4 years. And then the whole goal is to not spend a whole lot once we actually like do get off the dock. That's kind of how we set it up. So
we live very simply. By simple means, I'd say. It's interesting when you move onto a boat, you realize the things that you actually need to survive. And then obviously, like, we have little pleasantries around, some little excessive things. Like, I mean, I have fake flowers from our wedding here, which aren't crucial for our survival. We have stuffed animals galore because I love them. So it's like we learn what we need, and then we can build off of that if space allows. So being on a boat prevents us from just buying a bunch of excessive things that we don't need. And I like that because it keeps us very uncluttered. And don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of stuff that we should get rid of, and we'll work on that. It's almost summer cleaning time, but it's very simple. And I like that. It's taught me a lot about myself. And it also helps because you learn what you need to travel. And from backpacking, you don't need a whole lot.
I sold everything. I had like 4 outfits that I lived in for like 2 years.
And it's a very powerful thing to know is that you could be a turtle. Everything is on your back. It's great.
Yeah, we really don't need a lot.
It's quite the freeing life once you go to the minimalistic idea. In my opinion, it is. I never having done this now, I don't ever want to buy a large house in my life.
But think of all the space, Chris.
No, it's just more stuff to clean and like pay for it.
We could buy so many things.
No, it's not for me.
We could fill it with animals. We could have a farm.
Marissa wants a giant farm.
I do.
I will say we could have a farm,
small house.
We
can have a tiny house on the farm.
That's okay. If we ever did move to land, that's my prerequisite. It has to have room for a large garden. I want bees and I want chickens. Actually, no, now I want ducks because I realized that
you need to keep that at-home work lifestyle if you want to keep.
I'm planning on it. Okay.
Speaking of your skill sets, go in perfectly with your YouTube channel and your blog and all the social media presence that y'all have. Totally. I did take a look at it before this interview, and I was like, this is like documentary style. And then I'm like, oh, well, of course, because you do documentaries. But I could see it through your YouTube channel and the videos from production style to camera angles, like all of it was amazing. So
thank you.
Hats off to y'all on that. And for anybody listening, the link is going to be in the show notes.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that.
Just something we want to focus on more too. Like while we've been doing the YouTube channel, it's mostly been DIY, like refitting the boat. And there's only so many beautiful camera shots you can do of someone like sawing something with a jigsaw
or sanding. Hours of sanding.
So that's something I'm very much looking forward to, is actually once we're cruising and seeing beautiful places of the world, to focus more on making things look pretty and doing a lot more justice in the camera world, because I haven't gotten to do a ton of that so far with our channel.
Yeah.
As much as that is. Yeah. So it'll be really weird actually, because all of our demographics so far for our YouTube channel is mostly DIY, people that want to see refitting young couples.
I don't know if they want to see us refitting or if they just want to see us struggle, because part of me thinks that these people are just watching us to see how much agony we're in as we're sanding constantly.
But I'm interested when that isn't like the core premise.
They're all going to leave. All of our subscribers leave. They're gone.
You'll get new ones.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And for the right reasons, hopefully. So I've got two questions that I ask every couple who's on the podcast. Number one is, what is your definition of love? I'd like to hear individually.
Ooh. That's tough.
Or just, describe it. You can't give like a solid sentence.
Oh, thank you. I would say that is the definition of love. You go first.
Having the person you can say you go first.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a hard question because I think that love is a spectrum. I like to tell my very close friends, I love you in every sense of the word, meaning, oh my gosh, that's so hard to actually define it.
Yeah, that's the point, right? It's hard.
It is very hard to define, but when you love someone, you care about them so intensely that you will do anything to help them thrive. And I mean, I love you in every sense of the word, and you're my life partner. You're my best friend. You are everything. You are my person. And I don't know how to define that. That's so hard. Does that make sense?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to submit that one as my definition. It's very loose. It's very take it as you will, interpret it yourself, but your turn.
I think, man, I'm going to struggle through this one too, but I would say love it's something that you can't teach. It's something that you can't buy. It's something that is only inherent. It's only going to come to you with the best intentions usually. I don't think I can't really explain it either in a way that would make sense to any logical person, but
it's usually illogical.
Yeah,
it's very logical. Good point. I think it's something that'll make a man go to the end of the world more than any other thing in this world. It would make me do anything for you for sure.
Get on a Greyhound bus. Go a few hours.
Greyhound bus. I don't know if I would do it again, but I'm just kidding.
That's the thing is defining love. My love language is more so like acts of service is one of them. Like these gestures, like it could be anything from jumping on a Greyhound bus to picking a flower that he sees on a walk and being like, I thought of you. Yeah. So I think it's, for me at least, my definition of love is doing things for the people you care about without being prompted. I think that's what my definition would be.
That's a good one.
Is it?
It's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that one.
Cool.
I'll take that one too.
I love it. This is more of a fun one. If your relationship was to be turned into a movie, what would be the title?
Ooh. I have a lot of really snarky, funny ones, but
go ahead.
No, I don't think I should say those. We're trying to help Kevin's podcast grow, not have people jump ship immediately. Okay. I think a good one would be You, Me, and the Sea.
Nice. It's a good one.
Good. Ring to it.
I just keep on thinking like struggling through the boatyard or like I feel like there's been a lot of struggles.
Life, love, and struggle.
Like we've also been going through life. I mean, especially our married life has been halfway through COVID. So there's been like a lot of just the world falling apart around us. And I'm like, we're going to make it.
Against all odds.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
There you go.
Against all odds.
I don't know.
Come on, you work in cinema. This should be like,
it's all documentaries. It's all real.
Well, this is real. What's the title? Let's go. Come on. Pitter patter.
I don't know.
Put pressure on him.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm gonna say You, Me, and the Sea. That's a good one.
I think that is a good one.
That's a good one. If we
I
ever
agree.
have a movie, that's what we'll name it.
Cool.
I also poll my community for questions, just generally to people that I interview in the podcast of what they would like to know. So I have a few questions on that. I also polled Instagram. Need to check real quick to see if anybody replied to that. So there's 3 questions from the community. Number 1, which I think this is very fitting for boat life, is how do you balance building a life together and still being a sovereign being?
Ooh, that's a deep one. I like that. So I think we explained this a little bit ago where we were long distance and kind of were growing simultaneously apart. Mm-hmm. But I mean, now that we live together and we're together pretty much 24/7, it's been kind of hard to be a sovereign being, but
not at all. I disagree with you 100%.
Really?
Yeah. I don't write. I don't do any social media. Okay. I don't do any of the things that you do, and I don't want to either.
That's true.
I think you have that role and you do good at it, and I will let you thrive.
That's
and
true. I didn't think about that.
Don't do you do a lot of the boat work, but you don't, when it comes to the really nasty stuff that you don't want to do, I get to do all that stuff.
I also don't know how you do it without, like, you do it the same way you breathe. Exactly. You just know how.
I'm learning.
And you're really good at it. So that's true. We both exist in these separate spaces 100%. While being together. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
right.
There's a lot of ways that I would say that we are completely different in the roles that we take on. And that is inherently what describes us as our own human beings, like our job, the things that we do, the things that we like to do. I think, there's a lot, like I just said, like, if anybody listening, especially even our followers, I don't do any of the social media stuff. Like Marissa, I do the editing for our videos. I shoot a lot of it, but as soon as it exports, I'm like, here you go. And
that is funny.
All of it. And I don't even respond.
People will find Chris like in public and be like, hey man, like it's great to talk to you in person. We've only talked online. And Chris is like, I don't know who you are. Nice to meet you. So, that's funny.
Anyways, I would say that there's definitely that.
No, you're totally right.
I think that in the way we've set up our life now on the boat is that it is our own beings. You know what I mean? Like you are definitely, not only do you do a lot of social media, that's also what you like to do, and that's what you want to keep doing in future. And for me too, I do a lot of camera operating for stuff that I really like. Like I just traveled to 6 different states in the last 2 weeks, and I'm totally burned out and I don't want to do that anymore right now. But you don't have any part in that. You know what I mean? So I definitely have my own little ecosystem of camera stuff that I like to do. And that also trickles down in the boat too. Like there's a lot of boat work that I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I have a little bit of like people know me by the work that I've done.
No, they do.
Not on this boat, but like on other boats too.
I'll brag for you. They definitely do. People, we just went to U-Haul like 2 days ago, and the guy at U-Haul was like, hey, you're Chris from Neely Boatworks. Like you build all this stuff. It was just totally random outside of a boat atmosphere. It's not something you would expect. Yeah. So I will brag for you. You are very good at what you do.
And that's something I foresee if I could look 50 years from now and I could see old Chris in a workshop, like doing something like that. That to me is my end goal. Is to, like, that's cool. I like that.
On our farm. Yeah.
That's awesome. Another question, and this is actually multiple questions of the same topic, which is boundaries. And I would love to know how you do that, being in the same boat.
Yeah.
Literally, like, how do you have alone time, alone space, especially in the seasons when you're out at sea for a while and not docked up?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
No, so
imagine.
Really not, honestly.
Privacy is an illusion on a boat. Like we have doors and things, but I mean, it's an illusion.
I will say the only time we ever actually get alone time is when there is an argument and one of us calls for like a timeout. It doesn't happen often, but like it does happen. I think it happens to everybody. Yeah. It's just comical on a boat because Marissa would be like, I need a space. I'm like, fine. And I need a minute. I walk like 12 feet to to a different room, and like you can still hear each other breathing basically.
Yeah.
But like
it's something that we've had to learn. When we were living in Tahoe, that was a big learning experience for us, because when we would have these arguments, and again, it happened a lot more frequently there because we were still learning to live with each other. Mm-hmm. We would get into these little spats and Chris would climb in his truck and he would drive away. And we actually went to couples counseling for this reason and stuff like that, to discuss how we could better talk to each other and talk things out. And something that my counselor recommended was giving expectations and time limits. Like, it's okay if you need space. Tell the other person you need space. You're going to leave for 10 minutes and then you'll be back. So then you're not giving the other person anxiety and like all this sense of dread and things like that. So that's obviously, we can't drive away now. We're in a boat together, but I actually get that question online a lot, and it's kind of snarky the way people ask it. So I really like the way your person asked this question, but usually the question is, do you just jump overboard when you're mad at each other? And my favorite thing to say is, well, actually, we talk things out like adults, which is a very watered down way of saying we talk things out now. We've learned to communicate with each other because communication really is key. You don't want your loved one to be upset. You don't want to be upset. So it's just taking the emotions out of it as much as you can and figuring out, identifying the problem and being like, okay, I understand that you're upset with me because I leave piles of clothes around the boat. I can see how that would be frustrating. Is there anything I can do to help aid in that frustration?
Just an example, but yeah.
That's just an example. Yeah. So we have to come at it with the common agreement that we're trying to get through this together. We're not fighting each other. We're fighting a common issue that's making us both upset.
I also, and like just to pin it too, is that there's not really any argument we've ever had that I feel like we can just leave, like separate and leave it and not talk about it. I feel like they always come back and they always come back tenfold. So like in our experience, it's always, we both agree, even though in the moment we don't usually want to do this, that it's always better just to bang out like whatever issue it is and get it over with and then move on, because
don't put it on the back burner because things will overflow and they'll build. So deal with the problem right then. If you need a minute,
no matter how hard it is.
Yeah. If you need a minute to collect your thoughts or something, be like, hey, I don't want to talk about this right now. I need a minute to collect my thoughts and my emotions. Can we circle back in 5-10 minutes? And that's
when I'll go take my little walk to the front of the bow.
Yeah. Take a little walkabout. So usually like you just have to collect yourself. And that's a boundary that I think that we have expressed a lot. That's the number one boundary we've set up, is respecting each other's need for space, air quotations, for space every once in a while, being like, hey, I need a minute. And
not perfect at it.
That. We're not perfect at it, but we're learning. That's all we can do is both learn. So that's definitely a boundary. I would say another boundary is respecting the other person's mental state. So I'm a person who gets really mentally drained, especially with over socializing. And I'm empathetic. So that means I absorb a lot of energies, which can be so exhausting. And part of living on a boat is that there is a very unique and vast community of all of us. So it's very social, very, hey, what are you doing tonight? Let's get together, without making any previous plans, which can be exhausting. So I've had to kind of set up that boundary with Chris, like, hey, before you commit to going and hanging out with these people, can you ask me first so I can make sure I'm mentally in it and not just torturing myself? And that's another boundary. So is respecting the other person's mental health. And it goes both ways. You're the same way too. So
last question is, I thought it was unique, and I chose to ask this to y'all specifically because y'all basically got married, got on a boat, and here you are 4 years later. So can the honeymoon phase be sustained? Is this your honeymoon? I mean, are you still on it?
No and yes.
No and yes. I think it comes in waves. It comes in waves, especially with this lifestyle. We're doing so many new things constantly where it can feel like a honeymoon phase all over again. And we're preparing to sail to Mexico, which I think is going to be a great honeymoon phase. We're going to be doing something exciting and new together. And that's what a honeymoon is, right? Is celebrating something exciting and new together. So I think it will come in waves. Sometimes I think
it's really important to not I think it's really important to not expect something, inflate the idea too much, that when you're in the moment, it's not what you thought it was. I did that for sure in Tahoe. And I don't want, like, I'm 100% putting everything to not do that again when we go to Mexico, because like I've already said before, there's a lot of things just cruising a boat inherently, that there's a lot of stress involved, a ton of stress involved. So as much fun as I know we're going to have, 100%, I just don't want to overinflate the idea in my mind, because there's going to be a lot of stresses that are totally going to put it in context a little bit for non-cruisers, there's a really high burnout for people that do exactly what we have done, bought a boat, worked all like for years on it, put not only money into it, but like all your sweat and tears into it as well.
And blood. There's blood.
Yeah, there's blood in it. and like started off the venture and just had a horrible time. You know, and either there's really only two things that happen. You either sell the boat and you stay together, or more frequently I would say is that the couple breaks up and one person keeps sailing and one goes away. So that happens at 50, I would say, % of couples.
It happens a lot.
Wow.
Like if not more. So there's a lot riding on just our next few months together.
Yeah. And I think
the honeymoon phase, I agree with, comes in spurts.
It does. I think that we'll make it through the cruising though. And, you know, we have a lot of people agreeing with us, like, you guys have been through hell and back already. I think you'll be fine. Yeah. And we also have an agreement where we're not going to force this on ourselves. If we're not having fun, we're not going to do it.
We're going to do it as long as it's fun.
We're going to do it as long as it's fun. And that's all you can do in life. And the point is that I want to have fun with Chris. Chris wants to have fun with me. If we're not happy, we're not doing it, because I think that, I put you first.
But I think if I've learned anything, like to answer your question, is the honeymoon phase sustainable? I think I get moments of the honeymoon phase throughout every day with you.
Oh,
it's true. But I'm not saying the whole day is honeymoon phase, but
isn't when I decide to sand instead of
no,
you?
It's not that. It's just little things that like only us would know. You know, the little things is all I'm trying to say. So there's like little inside innuendos.
It's when I pick up my piles of clothes, isn't it?
That's totally. That's the one.
That's the one.
Make me sound like such a clean freak.
Well, you're clean. I'm not. That's how it goes. It's fine.
I can totally relate. I'm the clean one in my relationship as well. So thank you all so much for being on the show. This has been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot from you all and your relationship. And I love how you've taken the moments of like the story about being on the boat, for example, with the storm and all that, and all the things that would cause conflict, you have grown from it. And I just, from hearing your story and listening to y'all for the past hour, that's one of the things that I want to highlight for everybody listening, is that you're using all of that as opportunities to grow closer. And you shared a bunch of amazing, realistic and practical guidance and advice on how to do just that. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We appreciate it. It's not every day we get to talk about us instead of the boat. So
it's a really good idea, honestly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to the Heartbeat Podcast series, Real Love Stories. As you can tell, that was an amazing couple, an amazing episode. There will be more episodes out like this, so be sure to subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that notification bell and leave a comment as well. If you have any questions that you would want me to ask, I polled the community for questions. If you want to be a part of that poll, you want to ask your questions, be sure to do it in the Heart Gang app. Go to the App Store, search Heart Gang, join our community. We've got free coaching, free courses on love, relationships, and human connection. And it really is the place to be if you're looking to master love in your life. Also, if you know of an inspiring couple that you want me to interview, or you're just like, oh my gosh, like they've got such a unique lifestyle, or their love is so pure and you can just feel it every time you're around them, I want to interview them. And if you think they'd be up for it, ask them first. And if they are up for it, email me, kevin@heartguy.com, or you can DM me anywhere. And I would love to interview them and have them on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Put some heart into everything that you do today.